the bustling heart of the city, the Velvet Diner stood as a beacon of warmth with its glowing neon sign and the promise of comfort food that had drawn locals and tourists alike for decades. Among the clatter of dishes and the low murmur of conversations, Julia Mason blended seamlessly with the other waitstaff, her apron a bit too big and her smile a tad too practiced. To the untrained eye, Julia was just another face in the crowd, one of many waitresses navigating the tight spaces between packed tables with a tray balanced expertly in hand. Tonight, however, was different. As she approached table 12, a favored spot by the panoramic window overlooking the city skyline, Julia's usual calm was pierced by the sharp tones of a customer known among the staff for his opulence, and his equally grand disdain for those he deemed beneath him. This customer, Mr. Richard Belmont, a real estate mogul known for his ruthless business tactics and ostentatious lifestyle, was in the midst of belittling another waiter when his gaze shifted to Julia, marking her as his next target. "Finally, some service," Richard snapped as Julia approached, his voice loud enough to turn heads. "Let's hope you're quicker than your colleague. It's appalling how slow this place has become." As Julia forced a polite smile and reached for her notepad, the stakes were clear. Maintain her cover as a humble waitress and manage the night without incident, or confront the belittling patron who had no idea that the woman he was about to shame owned not just the diner, but a chain of hotels across the nation. Tonight, the masks of daily roles were worn tightly, but beneath Julia's unassuming facade lay a test of patience and identity that could unravel in unexpected ways. Julia Mason had not always been a figure shrouded in wealth and quiet power. Her journey began in the humbler outskirts of the city, where she was raised by a single mother who juggled multiple jobs to keep their modest apartment a roof over their heads. Julia's early life was marked by the echoing laughter in their cramped kitchen, as her mother spun tales of hope and perseverance over simmering pots of their family recipes. It was in this kitchen that Julia's love for food and her dream of a better life were kindled. By the time she was 18, Julia had taken these lessons to heart, stepping into the world with nothing but a small loan and a big dream. She started as a waitress at the very diner she would one day own, learning the ropes of the hospitality industry from the ground up. The Velvet Diner, at that time, was a city staple, known for its cozy ambiance and classic American menu. It was there she met Michael, a kind-hearted chef who saw in Julia not just a waitress, but a potential partner in business and eventually in life. Together, they nurtured the diner, slowly transforming it into a destination not just for food, but for warmth and community. As their success grew, so did their ventures, expanding into a series of boutique hotels known for their unique blend of luxury and homeliness, a mirror of Julia's own personality. Despite her financial success, Julia kept her ownership of these establishments a closely guarded secret, preferring to remain unassuming in the public eye. Richard Belmont, in contrast, thrived in the spotlight. A self-made millionaire through ruthless real estate deals, Richard wore his wealth as both armor and advertisement. His relationships were transactions, his interactions performances. He valued efficiency and subservience from his staff, viewing the service industry as a ladder to his own comfort rather than a network of hard-working individuals. On the night in question, other key figures at the diner included Emily, a young waitress who looked up to Julia as a mentor, and Tom, the current manager of the diner, whose respect for Julia went beyond her secret as the owner. Both were aware of Julia's true identity and her reasons for keeping it under wraps, to understand her employees' day-to-day experiences and to ensure her establishments maintained the standards she set years ago. As Julia navigated the bustling diner, her interactions with Emily and Tom were subtle yet significant. Emily, who had recently moved to the city with aspirations of her own, found inspiration in Julia's quiet confidence and leadership. Tom, having been part of the diner's transformation, shared Julia's vision of service and success, emphasizing the value of every staff member, from the dishwasher to the front-of-house team. The diner itself, located at a bustling intersection in the city, was a microcosm of urban life. Its patrons ranged from high-powered executives like Richard Belmont to families enjoying a night out. The environment was a tapestry of clinking glasses, sizzling grills, and the constant hum of conversation. A symphony well known to Julia, who saw the diner not just as a business, but as a community hub, reflective of her journey from waitress to millionaire entrepreneur. As the evening unfolded, Julia's resolve was tested not just by Belmont's arrogance, but also by her commitment to her roots and her disguised role in the diner. Each interaction, each order taken, and each slight endured from Belmont added layers to Julia's character, revealing the complexity of navigating two worlds, one of affluence and authority, and the other of service and subtlety. As Julia moved gracefully between the tables, ensuring each guest felt attended to, Richard Belmont's demands grew increasingly unreasonable, and his comments more disparaging. The pivotal moment arrived when he loudly criticized the quality of his meal, a dish Julia herself had perfected and introduced to the menu years ago. His voice, laden with condescension, boomed across the diner, claiming the food was subpar for such an esteemed establishment. "Is this what passes for gourmet these days?" Richard scoffed, holding up a piece of steak with his fork for all to see. "I could find better at a roadside diner." The diner fell silent, the other patrons pausing to witness the spectacle. Julia, plate in hand, approached Richard's table with every eye in the diner now on her. In a calm yet firm voice, she offered to replace his meal. But Richard waved her off dismissively, not recognizing her authority. "No, I want to speak to the owner. I intend to make sure they understand the kind of incompetence being served under their name," he demanded, a smug smile creeping across his face. Julia paused, the weight of the moment settling upon her shoulders. This confrontation wasn't just about a disgruntled customer. It was a direct challenge to her life's work, a public test of her resolve and dignity. Deciding enough was enough, she responded in a voice that carried a quiet but undeniable authority. "I am the owner, Mr. Belmont." The diner erupted in a murmur of shock and curiosity as Julia stood there, the revelation hanging in the air like a palpable force. This incident marked a before and after, not just for Julia, but for everyone present, shifting the dynamics of power and setting the stage for a confrontation that would test Julia's dual identity as both owner and waitress. With her identity as the owner revealed, Julia found herself at the center of a rapidly escalating situation that tested her patience and leadership. Richard Belmont, taken aback by her declaration, quickly regained his composure, his expression morphing into one of disbelief and mockery. "You, the owner? That's quite the twist. Well then, perhaps you can personally ensure the standards are up to mark," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Julia, maintaining her composure, assured him that his concerns would be addressed, but Richard was not done. His ego bruised, he decided to take this opportunity to further assert his perceived superiority. As Julia returned to the kitchen to prepare a new dish for Richard, the entire staff buzzed with tension and disbelief. Emily and Tom rallied around Julia, offering their support and expressing their frustration with Richard's behavior. In the kitchen, Julia's hands moved with practiced ease, but her mind raced with the implications of her exposed identity and how it might affect her relationship with her staff and the perception of her leadership. Back at the table, Richard continued to agitate the situation, loudly complaining to other diners about the service and the food, attempting to draw them into his critique. Some patrons looked uncomfortable, while others seemed to agree, nodding and murmuring amongst themselves. This public challenge to her establishment's reputation spurred Julia to take decisive action. Emerging from the kitchen with a freshly prepared dish, Julia approached Richard's table with a composed demeanor. She set the plate before him with a polite smile, inviting him to try the meal prepared under her direct supervision. Richard, with a theatrical flourish, took a bite, his expression unreadable. The diner held its breath as he chewed slowly, then his face twisted into an exaggerated frown. "Mediocre, just as I thought," he declared loudly, pushing the plate away. "I expected more from the owner herself." Julia's response was measured but firm. "Mr. Belmont, I assure you that we strive for the highest quality, and I regret that we haven't met your expectations." If there's anything else we can do to improve your experience tonight, please let me know." Instead of appeasing him, her professionalism seemed to fuel his disdain further. He scoffed, standing up, ready to take this issue to a larger audience. "Perhaps the local food critic should hear about this. I wonder what they would think of your highest quality." This threat to escalate the issue to the media was a direct blow to Julia's hard-earned reputation. She realized that handling this situation would require not just culinary expertise, but strategic public relations maneuvering. The tension in the diner escalated as patrons began to take notice of the confrontation, some whispering and pulling out their phones to record the interaction. Determined to protect her establishment's integrity, Julia proposed a resolution. "Mr. Belmont, I invite you to join me in the kitchen. See for yourself how we operate, meet our dedicated staff, and perhaps understand our commitment to quality." Richard, intrigued by the opportunity to further assert his superiority, agreed, smirking as he followed Julia to the kitchen. The staff watched nervously as Julia led him through their routines, explaining each process with the hope of demonstrating not just the diner's operational standards, but also its soul, the warmth and dedication that had been the cornerstone of its success. Meanwhile, Emily and Tom took charge in the dining area, soothing ruffled patrons and managing the fallout of the ongoing drama. They reassured guests, offered complimentary desserts, and handled questions with a calmness that mirrored Julia's own leadership style. The kitchen tour did little to change Richard's outward attitude. He remained dismissively critical throughout. However, Julia noticed a slight softening as he observed the staff's genuine efforts and the intricate details that went into preparing each dish. Despite his continued harsh critique, there was a momentary glimpse of respect in his eyes that Julia hoped to expand upon. As they returned to the dining area, Julia was prepared for any outcome. She had faced down challenges before, from financial struggles to personal doubts, and this evening would be no exception. Her resolve was clear. No single disgruntled patron, no matter how influential, would dictate the destiny of her diner. The climax unfolded as Julia and Richard returned to the bustling diner, the eyes of every patron tracking their every move. The atmosphere was charged with tension, the air thick with anticipation. Richard, feeling empowered by the audience, prepared to deliver his final verdict in front of the now silent crowd. "This has been an enlightening tour, but it changes nothing," Richard announced loudly, his voice echoing across the room. "This place has lost the charm and quality it once boasted. It's just another overrated spot in the city." Julia stood beside him, her expression calm, but her stance resolute. This was her moment to defend not just her diner, but her life's work and legacy. She turned to face the crowd, her voice steady and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julia began, addressing the entire diner, "I appreciate your patience this evening. As the owner of Velvet Diner, I've always strived to maintain a place where everyone feels welcome and receives the best we have to offer. Tonight, it seems we have fallen short for at least one of our guests, and for that, I am truly sorry." The room fell silent, hanging on her every word. Julia continued, "However, I believe in the values this diner stands for: quality, community, and integrity. These are not just ideals, but practices we live by every day. If these principles are not evident to Mr. Belmont, I am prepared to make amends. But I will not allow one person's opinion to overshadow the hard work of our dedicated staff or the countless positive experiences we've shared with our community." Richard smirked, preparing to retort, when Julia raised her hand to stop him. "Furthermore," she added, "if the quality of our food and service is indeed as lacking as Mr. Belmont claims, I invite any of you to speak up now. Share your thoughts and experiences, and I will listen." This unexpected move shifted the dynamic dramatically. Patrons began to murmur among themselves, some nodding in agreement with Julia. Slowly, one after another, regulars started to stand up, voicing their support for the diner. "Every meal I've had here has been fantastic," one loyal customer said. "I've been coming here for years, and it's always been a highlight of my week." Another added, "The staff here are like family. They remember your name, your favorites. You don't get that kind of service just anywhere. As more patrons voiced their support, the atmosphere began to shift. The wave of affirmation from the crowd created a powerful counter-narrative to Richard's complaints. Caught off guard by the outpouring of support for Julia and the diner, Richard's confidence waned. His posture slackened, his facial expression turned from smugness to surprise, and then to isolation, as it became evident he stood alone in his criticism. Julia, bolstered by the support, addressed Richard directly. "Mr. Belmont, your feedback has been noted, and wherever we can improve, we will strive to do so. But Velvet Diner stands strong on the support and love of its patrons, and I am proud to stand with them." This confrontation, unfolding in the heart of her establishment, was more than just a battle over food quality. It was a vindication of Julia's philosophy and her community's unwavering loyalty. As the applause from the supportive patrons filled the Velvet Diner, the tension that had gripped the room began to dissipate. Richard Belmont, now visibly subdued and somewhat embarrassed by his isolation, slowly sank back into his chair. The wave of community support had not only undermined his criticisms, but it also highlighted his disconnect from the very values that the diner cherished. Julia, with a gracious yet firm approach, approached Richard once more. "Mr. Belmont, I understand that not every experience can meet everyone's expectations, and I respect your opinions," she said. "I hope that despite tonight's disagreements, you will give us another chance to prove our commitment to quality and service." Richard, his earlier bravado diminished, merely nodded. He seemed to recognize that his battle was not just with Julia or the diner, but with an entire community that had come to its defense. With a quiet murmur of acceptance, he agreed to leave the matter be, acknowledging the diner's importance to those who frequented it. "Perhaps I was too harsh," he conceded, his voice much softer than before. "Thank you for your graciousness through this." Julia offered a small, sincere smile as she returned to her duties, ensuring that every guest felt attended to, reinforcing the sense of community and care that had just been so robustly defended. Meanwhile, the staff, who had been tense throughout the confrontation, began to relax, buoyed by the support of the regulars and the calm leadership of Julia. As the evening progressed, the diner slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Patrons continued their meals, the clinking of cutlery resumed, and the earlier conflict became a topic of quiet conversation, with many expressing renewed appreciation for the place that had become a staple in their lives. The incident with Richard Belmont had not only tested the diner's values, but had ultimately strengthened the bonds within this unique culinary community. As the night drew to a close, the Velvet Diner settled back into its comforting routine. Richard Belmont, reflecting on the evening's events, quietly paid his bill and left a generous tip, a small gesture acknowledging his earlier behavior. He departed with a nod to Julia, a silent truce formed from the evening's revelations. While it was unlikely he would become a regular, the mutual respect had been restored on some level. Julia, standing by the entrance, watched the city lights twinkling in the distance, feeling a deep sense of pride and accomplishment. The diner wasn't just a business. It was a community cornerstone that had stood the test of adversity, emerging stronger. Her dual role as both the owner and a waitress had been publicly embraced, bridging the gap between management and staff, and reaffirming her commitment to her roots and her dedication to her staff and patrons. In the days that followed, the Velvet Diner saw an uptick in visits. Regulars came more frequently, bringing friends to share in the experience of a place that valued quality and community above all. Julia continued to oversee her diner with renewed vigor, confident in the knowledge that her establishment was much more than just a place to eat. It was a home to many. As the gentle hum of the Velvet Diner faded into the night, the story of Julia Mason and her spirited defense of her establishment carried a powerful message about the strength of community and the importance of integrity. This tale wasn't just about a clash between a diner owner and a disgruntled patron. It was a testament to the collective voice of a community that values respect, quality, and mutual support. The incident at the Velvet Diner serves as a reminder that every establishment, no matter its size, plays a pivotal role in the fabric of its community. It highlights how a single voice of dissent can challenge, but also reinforce the bond between a business and its patrons. It's a call to all to not just seek out places that serve as mere venues of transaction, but as spaces of interaction, respect, and mutual growth. We invite you to reflect on the businesses in your community that make a difference, that go beyond the call of duty, and consider how you might support or elevate them. Share your stories in the comments below, engage with us on social media, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Let's celebrate the places that bring us together, the unsung heroes of our neighborhoods, and the quiet leaders like Julia, who serve with dignity and grace. Together, we can help ensure that these community cornerstones receive the recognition they deserve, continuing to thrive and inspire. So, the next time you visit your favorite local spot, remember the story of the Velvet Diner and consider how you might contribute to sustaining the spirit of community that places like these foster.